The air in the executive boardroom felt as if it had been vacuum sealed. No oxygen, only the metallic taste of dread. 24 well-polished, well-paid pairs of eyes flicked between me, rooted in the doorway with 2 designer suitcases, and Elizabeth, the 23-year-old intern who had been sharing my husband's bed, and his lies for 7 months. I hadn't planned to set foot in their quarterly budget meeting, but fate, like revenge, never asks for an appointment. "Special delivery for Elizabeth," I announced, my voice so even it almost disguised the tremor of suppressed rage that coiled in my chest. "I believe these are yours now." Her face, perfect, filtered and smugly untouchable, lost its color in an instant. I'd seen that same face beam at me across the company Christmas party, all saccharine charm, while she was likely texting my husband under the table. The French manicure I'd unknowingly funded through our joint account clenched at the edge of the mahogany table, her knuckles paling. My husband wasn't here. Of course not. Thursday afternoons were always reserved for client meetings. For the past 7 months, those meetings had taken place at the Marriott 2 blocks away, booked under his corporate account, because arrogance makes men sloppy. The CEO's Mont Blanc pen paused mid-air. "I'm sorry, who are you?" I smiled, not the hollow smile of a woman broken, but the sharp, deliberate one of someone who has weighed her punishment and found it just. "Linda, Daniel's wife, or his soon-to-be ex-wife." The wheels of my suitcases hissed across the carpet as I stepped further in. Since Elizabeth has been enjoying my husband, I thought she might as well enjoy his things too. Somewhere in the back, someone choked out, "Oh my God." I didn't look away from her. I wanted her to feel the slow burn of realization, her carefully scripted ascent into a senior executive's marital bed, unraveling thread by thread before the entire upper management team. 3 weeks ago, I wouldn't have had the strength. That Alexandra, the one who would have collapsed into sobs, died the night I saw the message light up his iPad while he showered. "Can't wait to taste you again tomorrow." We had the waterfront condo, the country club membership, plans for children, after his promotion. 15 years together, 5 years married, 3 years of injections and hormone treatments, all endured while he was working late. Betrayals arithmetic is always flawless in retrospect. The HR director rose, hands fluttering. "Mrs. Corvin, I think there's been some—" "No misunderstanding," I said, lifting a hand to silence her. "I have the receipts, screenshots, GPS logs, hotel bills, all of it." My palm rested on my handbag, the evidence inside like the weight of a loaded weapon. I unzipped the first suitcase. Right on top, the gray cashmere sweater I'd given him last Christmas. I tossed it to Elizabeth. She caught it reflexively, her expression tightening. "He likes when you scratch his back in that," I said evenly. "Not your nails. He's self-conscious about marks showing at the gym." A muffled laugh, CFO maybe, rolled through the room. I reached in again, retrieving his monogrammed shaving kit. "Face cream's inside, the one from Switzerland. If he skips a night, he gets irritable." I slid it across the table until it stopped dead in front of her. "Oh, and one more thing. He's allergic to shellfish," I said, my voice light as if sharing a party anecdote. "Breaks out in hives everywhere. But I suppose you already knew that. From all those candlelit dinners while I was at my mother's hospital bedside, watching her fade away." The atmosphere shifted instantly, the room's air turning cold and heavy. Elizabeth's throat bobbed as she tried to swallow, her gaze ricocheting from face to face, searching for refuge. But there was no lifeboat here, only a sea of silent witnesses to her unraveling. "Alexandra," she whispered, the sound brittle, fragile. "Oh, first names now. How intimate," I said, tilting my head just enough to make the gesture feel like a blade sliding into flesh. "You know what's truly funny? All those nights he said he was mentoring you. She has so much potential, he'd tell me. I was actually proud of him. Proud he was championing women in business." A laugh slipped out, hollow and sharp, as if dredged from some empty cavern inside me. The second suitcase landed on the table with a muted thud. This one has his toiletries, medications, watch his blood pressure during those exciting moments, and his watch collection. The Rolex was my anniversary gift, but since sentiment clearly means nothing to him, I see no reason to keep it. I smoothed my blazer, my armor, tailored for boardroom battles at my own firm, the one that made me feel powerful even while the ground beneath my life was crumbling. I've also taken the liberty, I continued, my voice silk over steel, of forwarding your compliance department every receipt where company money funded your little off-sites, the Marriott bills, the gifts, the dinners, all charged to the corporate card. I'm sure that violates more than a few policies. Her mascara bled into 2 jagged rivers down her cheeks. Good. Let her drown in them. A single tear in this moment would never match the ocean of grief I'd been wading through since I found the first proof. You can't just... This is a place of business, she stammered. So was my marriage, I said, the words sharp and cold enough to frost glass. At least it was supposed to be a partnership, but Daniel decided to invest his assets elsewhere. Now he can enjoy the dividends. I turned for the door, the weight of the performance pressing against my spine. My knees threatened to fold, but 15 years with Daniel had taught me one rule: never bleed where people can see it. So I straightened, shoulders squared, and walked out. The glass door swung shut behind me with a satisfying click, sealing her inside with my husband's possessions and the wreckage of her ambitions. Only when I reached the shadowed quiet of the parking garage did I let go. My forehead fell against the steering wheel, the cool leather soaking up the heat of my breath as the sobs broke free. They tore through me like tremors, leaving cracks in places I didn't know could break. This wasn't the story I'd signed up for. When I met Daniel in my final year of law school, he'd been the teaching assistant who stayed late to walk struggling students through case law. He had a way of making complicated things sound simple, of making people feel like they mattered. He'd made me feel like I mattered. He'd proposed on the ferry to Morro Bay, kneeling against the wind as the city lights burned gold in the distance. "You're the only certainty in my life," he'd said. The diamond had caught the last flare of sunset as he slid it onto my finger, sealing a promise I thought would outlast everything. We built our life like architects designing a cathedral, every choice deliberate, every detail shared. Which jobs to take, which home to buy, when to start a family, or so I thought. The first round of IVF failed. "It's okay," he'd said, holding me in the dark. "We have time." The second failed, and the third. Each time I blamed my body for its betrayal. Each time he told me we were in it together. Now I understood. He'd been in a different kind of together all along. From the pieces I'd gathered, their affair had begun not long after Elizabeth slipped into the company as a marketing intern, bright, ambitious, and a full 15 years younger than me. I'd met her at the summer picnic, all dimples and soft smiles, and thought she was sweet. I'd even told Daniel to look out for her. Mentor her, I'd said, like others had mentored him. The word curdled in my mouth now. Mentor. My laugh in the darkness of my car was hoarse, splintered. A sound born of pain and bitter irony. The signs had been there, camouflaged in the ordinary lies of a marriage on autopilot. Late nights, urgent weekend emergencies at the office, a sudden inexplicable devotion to the gym, the unfamiliar scent of cologne I hadn't bought him, the way his phone became a vault I was never allowed to open. But I'd been too busy keeping the scaffolding of our life upright to notice the cracks snaking through its foundations. My days were already overrun, cases piling at the firm, hormone injections scheduled like clockwork, caring for my mother as cancer hollowed her out, and keeping up the polished facade of our social life. I'd had no energy left for suspicion, and in that vacuum, betrayal had made itself at home. 2 weeks ago, my mother's suffering finally ended. The silence in her house was unbearable without the nurse's footsteps or the low hum of the oxygen machine. Daniel had been present in the loosest sense, making occasional appearances at family dinners, asking after her before steering the conversation back to quarterly reports and client dinners. The night after her funeral, I expected him to hold me. Instead, he announced a last-minute client meeting and left me alone with my grief. That was the night I found the messages. As if losing my mother weren't enough, I lost my husband in the same breath. I read through months of exchanges, each one a blade driven in and twisted. Promises, fantasies, complaints about me. He told her I was emotionally absent, obsessed with conceiving that our marriage had been dead for years. Meanwhile, I was bruising my abdomen with hormone shots, riding the violent tides of hope and despair, enduring the physical toll of trying to give us a future. All while I was holding my mother's hand as death claimed her inch by inch. All while I was keeping our home immaculate, our calendar full, our finances seamless. Every text became evidence, an archive of deceit. Every I love you I'd heard, every plan we'd made, was a lie dressed in a familiar voice. "You're the only woman who truly understands me," he'd typed. "When can I have you all to myself?" she'd answered. "Soon," he promised, just waiting for the right time to detonate my life. I confronted him when he finally came home, trailing her perfume and hotel soap like a signature. He froze in the doorway, seeing me in the dark living room, the iPad glowing in my lap. The look on his face, God, I'll never forget it. Not guilt, not even fear, just irritation. "It's not what you think," he said, defaulting to the cheater's oldest cliché. "Really?" My voice was razor thin. "Because I think you've been screwing your intern while I've been watching my mother die and trying to conceive your child. Tell me exactly how that's not what I think." He pivoted instantly, his tone sharpening. "You haven't been present in this marriage for years, Alex. What did you expect?" And there it was, the absolution he was writing for himself, in my blood. Not just betrayal, but the gall to blame me, as if my grief, my ambition, my desire for children had somehow shoved him into another woman's bed. "Get out," I told him, my voice low and lethal. "This is my house too," he said. "The house my law degree pays for? The house in my name because your credit was trash when we bought it? That house?" He slept in the guest room that night, and the next, we coexisted in a silence so cold it felt structural. Two strangers occupying the same walls, the same air, yet separated by a chasm that had once been bridged by what I mistook for love. 3 mornings later, over the brittle clink of cutlery, he finally spoke. "We need to talk about this rationally," he said, as if dictating terms to an underling. "People make mistakes. Marriages survive affairs all the time." I looked at him across the kitchen island. This man I'd built my life around, now a stranger who could dismantle it without remorse and then expect my forgiveness as if it were a clause in our vows. "You're right," I said, my tone even, surgical. "We do need to talk rationally." Relief flickered in his eyes. He thought I was about to grant him absolution. "I've already retained a divorce attorney. You'll hear from them soon. In the meantime, I'll need you out by tomorrow." The disbelief twisted his face. "You can't be serious. Where am I supposed to go?" I shrugged. "I don't know, Daniel. Maybe Elizabeth has space in her studio, or perhaps one of the other women you've entertained can offer you a bed." The flash in his eyes confirmed it. Elizabeth was only one chapter in a longer, uglier story. "Alex, be reasonable." "I am. In fact, I'll help you pack." That night, after he retreated to the guest room like an exile, I sat alone in our bedroom and began drafting my campaign. If years as a corporate attorney had taught me anything, it was that wars aren't won in rage. They're won in preparation. First, I fortified my position. I moved my share of funds from our joint accounts into my personal one. I changed passwords on every shared account, from streaming services to utilities. I called each credit card company and had his name removed as an authorized user. I wasn't taking what wasn't mine, but I would not be left defenseless. Then came the arsenal. Screenshots of their messages were only the opening salvo. I needed a deeper strike. Over coffee the next morning, I met with Janet, a former detective turned private investigator whose skill set had saved more than one of my clients in court. "I don't need proof he's cheating," I told her. "I need proof he used company resources to do it." Janet's mouth curved in something between approval and intrigue. "Going for the professional jugular. He made it professional when he chose someone on his payroll. I'm just closing the loop." Within 48 hours, she delivered a file thick enough to cripple him. Corporate card charges for hotel rooms, receipts for lavish dinners coded as client meetings with no clients, company car logs matching their trysts, even a Chicago conference where Elizabeth had been added to the attendee list without cause. It was enough to eviscerate him under the company's ethics policy, and deliciously ironic, considering he'd helped draft those very rules. But my work wasn't finished. While he was at the office, I combed through his home study with the precision of someone cataloging evidence for trial. In a desk drawer, I found a small velvet box. Inside, diamond earrings I'd never seen. Beneath them, a receipt, $3,800, purchased 2 weeks ago. My birthday was months away. Our anniversary had come and gone without so much as flowers. They were hers, bought while my mother lay dying. I slipped the earrings into my own jewelry box. They would never touch her ears. In that same drawer, I discovered something far more potent, a thumb drive. I plugged it into my laptop. Inside, confidential company documents, strategy memos, financial forecasts, personnel files. The kind of data that, in our industry, could end careers. I copied everything, then placed the drive back exactly where I'd found it. Not to use now, but to keep, like a loaded weapon tucked away for the moment I might truly need it. By the third day of my quiet war, I had enough ammunition to annihilate both his marriage and his career. But that was not my opening move. Professional destruction was a finale, one I'd save, depending on how Daniel chose to conduct himself in the divorce. First, I wanted the social kill, the humiliation, the whispers in corridors that would cling to him and his golden girl long after I'd erased both from my life. That's when the suitcase delivery took form. Timing was everything. Thursday's quarterly budget meeting, every executive who mattered in one room. Daniel, meanwhile, would be at his standing client meeting at the Marriott. Elizabeth, however, had been summoned to present key marketing data. I'd made sure of it. The day before, I'd called the CEO's assistant, my voice crisp and efficient, introducing myself as Daniel's assistant. "Elizabeth's prepared some crucial material Daniel wants included in the meeting," I'd said. "I thought Daniel was presenting that himself," she'd replied, puzzled. "Oh, he's got a conflict," I lied without hesitation. "He asked specifically for Elizabeth to cover for him." And just like that, Elizabeth was scheduled to be in the boardroom while Daniel stewed alone at the hotel, wondering why his calls went unanswered. The morning of my plan, I woke with an unfamiliar stillness, a calm so pure it almost frightened me. I dressed like a woman going into battle in full regalia, my most expensive suit, flawless makeup, hair smoothed into glossy submission. If they were going to remember this moment for years, and they would also remember that I looked magnificent while delivering it. I packed with surgical precision, everything folded, aligned, chosen to wound. His prized watch collection, the autographed baseball, the tailored suits, the rare scotch, the symbols of his carefully curated image. I left nothing haphazard. Revenge, like litigation, thrives on preparation. When the second suitcase zipped shut, a strange peace settled over me. For weeks I'd been reacting, drowning under waves of betrayal. Now I was the one setting the tide. I rehearsed my words in the mirror, not a trace of tears, no trembling voice. They would expect the wronged wife unraveling. Instead, they would get something colder, sharper. Fury encased in ice. On the drive over, I ran through contingencies, security intervention, Elizabeth absent, Daniel bursting in mid-performance. But deep down, I knew it would work. People like Daniel and Elizabeth lived on the assumption of silence, that those they wronged would suffer privately rather than risk a scene. I was done with silence. At exactly 2:45, I pulled into the visitor lot. The meeting would be in full swing. I checked my lipstick in the rearview mirror, a final act of readiness, then lifted the suitcases from my trunk. The front desk security guard recognized me from holiday parties and summer events. "Mrs. Corvin, long time. Is Daniel expecting you?" I smiled warmly, the kind of smile that never warns of the knife. "It's a surprise, just bringing him a few things for his trip tomorrow." He waved me through without hesitation. Too easy. In the elevator, a young man offered to help carry the luggage. "No, thank you," I said. "I need to do this myself." The suitcases were light compared to the burden I'd been dragging for weeks. The executive floor was hushed, the air conditioning whispering under the faint murmur of voices from the boardroom. The carpet muffled the sound of the wheels as I rolled my cargo toward the glass-walled room. Through the pane, I saw them all. CEO at the head, VPs and directors lining the sides. And there she was, Elizabeth, mid-presentation, pointing at the screen, commanding the room, basking in her moment. I took one steadying breath, straightened my spine, and pushed open the door. The moment I rolled those suitcases into the boardroom, time seemed to dilate. I watched Elizabeth's face flicker through emotions like a faulty reel. Confusion, dawning recognition, horror, panic, each expression snapping into the next before she could mask it. What followed was almost operatic in its perfection. I placed each of Daniel's possessions on the table with the calm precision of evidence being entered into court, narrating their significance in a tone stripped of any visible emotion. The air shifted. First shock, then uneasy shifting in seats, then the irresistible pull of gossip taking root. By the time I mentioned Daniel's blood pressure medication, someone actually let out a poorly stifled snort. Elizabeth's phone lit up under the table as her manicured fingers typed furiously. I could picture Daniel's expression miles away in their Marriott hideaway, checking his watch, wondering why she hadn't shown, staring at her texts. She's here. She knows. She's telling everyone. I paused mid-item, tilting my head. "Your phone seems busy, Elizabeth. Is my husband asking for your whereabouts? Do let him know exactly where you are and what we're discussing." Her head snapped up, her face a dangerous shade of crimson. "This is completely unprofessional," she hissed. I let the word hang in the air, then repeated it, savoring it like a rare vintage. Unprofessional? Like sleeping with your married boss? Or perhaps like billing your little retreats to the corporate card? That variety of unprofessional? The CEO, Mark, cleared his throat, his voice regaining its footing. "Mrs. Corvin, while I understand you're going through something personal—" "Oh, it ceased to be personal the moment they started charging their hotel rooms to the company account," I said, retrieving a neatly organized folder from my handbag and sliding it toward him. Page 3. Itemized policy violations. Page 7. Screenshots of Daniel promising Elizabeth a promotion in exchange for continued involvement. Your HR handbook labels that quid pro quo harassment, if I'm not mistaken. Hartman's face darkened as he flipped through the pages. The HR director leaned in, scanning the documents, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Ms. Parker," Richard said, his voice now edged with steel, "is this true?" Elizabeth's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "It's not." "I'll take that as a yes," he cut her off. Turning to the HR director, "Janet, handle this." "Already in motion," Janet replied, rising. "Miss Parker, my office, now." Elizabeth stayed rooted to her seat, Daniel's cashmere sweater balled in her fists like a lifeline. "But I didn't—" "He told me you were separated," she said, her gaze darting to me, pleading. The room went still, waiting for my reply. "Separated," I echoed. "While I was undergoing fertility treatments for our child, while I was caring for my dying mother. Curious definition of the term." Her face cracked, the mask slipping. "He said you weren't intimate anymore, that you were obsessed with your career, that you didn't love him like I did. And you believed him, I said quietly, not as a question, but as a final verdict, just as you believed you were the exception, that he'd never felt this way before, that he'd leave me for you. A single tear traced a blackened path down her cheek. For a fleeting moment, pity tried to surface, but I kept it buried. Let me save you the heartbreak, Elizabeth. Daniel's on his third marriage. The first two also thought they were singular until they met the next one. It's not romance, it's repetition. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Daniel. Of course. I glanced at the screen, let a slow smile form, then pressed speaker. Alex, where the hell is Elizabeth? We were supposed to meet an hour ago. The room collectively leaned in, their hunger for the spectacle no longer hidden. Hello, Daniel, I said, my voice silk over ice. Elizabeth's unavailable at the moment. She's in a meeting with your executive team and me. We're having the most riveting discussion about corporate ethics. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Then came his voice, low, sharp-edged, dangerous. What did you do? Oh, nothing extravagant, I said lightly. Just hand-delivered your possessions to your girlfriend in front of your leadership team. And while I was at it, I shared that little document you've been compiling, the one that conveniently outlines how company money has been underwriting your extracurriculars. You had no right. Daniel, I cut in, I'm a corporate attorney who specializes in ethics breaches. I have every right. As your wife, I have every right. And as a person with self-respect, I have every right. This is going to cost you in the divorce, he warned. A laugh escaped me. Pure amusement, no fear in it. Sweetheart, I'm the one with the prenup that keeps my assets locked down. I'm the one holding proof of your affair and your misuse of corporate funds. I'm the one with a job that's still secure. Now remind me again, what exactly is this going to cost me? Richard's voice entered, calm but unyielding. Daniel, it's Richard. I suggest you come to my office now. The line went dead. I slipped my phone away, surveying the faces around the table. 24 people, some frozen in shock, others hiding a flicker of admiration. Elizabeth sat collapsed in her chair, sweater clutched in her hands like a lifeline, while Janet from HR waited to escort her out. Well, I said, almost cheerfully, that concludes my delivery. Thank you for your time and sorry for the detour from your agenda. Mrs. Corvin, Richard called as I reached the door. I turned, meeting his gaze. This company owes you an apology, he said gravely. We'll be treating this with the seriousness it warrants. I inclined my head, acknowledging but not accepting. Perhaps start by patching the holes in your ethics program. They appear to be wide enough to drive a company car through. And then I left, abandoning Daniel's baggage, literal and otherwise, right where it belonged. The elevator doors closed behind me, sealing the scene away. My phone buzzed again, this time my divorce attorney. It's done, I texted her, as planned. Excellent, she replied. This should make settlement talks very simple. By the time I reached my car, the adrenaline had begun to ebb. My fingers trembled as I fit the key into the ignition, the first physical sign of how tightly I'd been holding everything in. I'd done it, looked them both in the eye, and refused to shrink. In the rearview mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back, not because she looked different, but because she felt different, lighter, sharper, as though a heavy, constricting skin had been peeled away. Another buzz, a text from an unknown number. How could you humiliate me like that? You've ruined everything. Delete. No response. She was no longer part of my life. Neither was he. Instead, I drove to the waterfront park where Daniel had once gotten down on one knee. I sat on a bench facing the sea, watching wave after wave collapse against the shore, retreating only to gather strength and return again, relentless, just like me. A year later, I stood in the kitchen of my new home, morning light flooding in from east-facing windows. A different view, a better life. One I couldn't have imagined that day I wheeled 2 suitcases into a boardroom and rewrote the story. The fallout had been swift. Daniel was terminated before sunset for ethics violations. Elizabeth was reassigned, then quietly cut during a restructuring 3 months later. The divorce wrapped quickly, his lawyer urging him to take my terms before more details spilled. I sold the waterfront condo, too many ghosts, and bought a craftsman in the neighborhood Daniel once dismissed as beneath us. I planted a garden. I adopted a rescue dog. I reclaimed every corner of my life that had been bent and shrunk to accommodate him, and I never once looked back. My mother's absence remained an unfillable hollow, but I often found myself speaking to her among the roses. "You were right about him," I'd murmur while trimming thorny stems or pulling stubborn weeds. "You saw what I couldn't bear to." She had never criticized Daniel outright, but her eyes had betrayed her, tightening when he checked his phone at family dinners, narrowing slightly when he dismissed my opinions as though they were inconveniences. She had known, in that way mothers always seem to know. Work became a place not only of recovery, but of purpose. My very public dismantling of my marriage had turned into something of a calling card. Organizations began seeking me out to overhaul ethics programs and strengthen harassment policies. One client, half admiring and half awed, called me the attorney who actually lives by the rules she enforces. I embraced the role, determined to help build workplaces where men like Daniel would find no shadows to hide in. As for children, I decided to pursue that dream on my own terms. I'd begun the early stages of adoption, this time without anyone's conditions, manipulations, or half-hearted promises. For the first time, the thought of motherhood filled me with uncomplicated anticipation. My phone chimed, a lunch reminder with Janet, my private investigator turned confidant. We met once a month now, swapping war stories from our respective professions and enjoying the easy camaraderie forged in the fire of that investigation. As I reached for my purse, my eyes caught the framed quote on my entryway table. "Sometimes the heaviest things we carry are the stories we never tell." I had told mine, loudly, publicly, unapologetically, and in doing so, I had put down a weight I hadn't realized I'd been hauling, the weight of expectation, of being the dignified wife who absorbs betrayal quietly, of the unspoken rule that women should carry pain in silence to spare men from its consequences. Stepping outside, I inhaled the crisp bite of autumn. My phone buzzed again, this time with a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Saw Daniel at the Capitol Grill last night with someone who can't be more than 25. Some things never change." A former neighbor, I realized, and just for a second there was a flicker, not of longing or jealousy, but of pure pity for the young woman who had no idea what she was stepping into. I typed back, "I hope she delivers his suitcase somewhere even more public than I did." Then I deleted the exchange and slid my phone into my bag. Daniel's life was no longer my subplot. That book had closed, and I was well into the next chapter, one where I was both the author and the heroine. At lunch, Janet lifted her glass in a toast. "To women who refuse to be reduced to footnotes in their own stories." I clinked mine against hers. "And to luggage that finds its rightful destination." We laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from recognition, from survival. In that moment, I felt something settle into place, an ease I hadn't known I was missing. The sting of humiliation had long since alchemized into something else, freedom. The kind that comes from standing in your truth with no thought to the fallout. Later that afternoon, I wandered through my garden, checking on the last stubborn blooms of the dahlias. My thoughts drifted to that day in the boardroom, how my hands had been steady while my pulse thundered, how little I had known about what would follow. If I could step back and whisper into that woman's ear, I'd tell her only this: "This moment isn't your ending. It's the first page of a better story." And I was right. It absolutely was.